Okay, let's do a video. This won't be very quick because this is about the 5th time I've tried it and it's become longer and longer, but I'm trying to include enough information here. So this is primarily intended for people who want to learn about radiation detection devices that can help protect themselves in the case of an event of some sort for preparedness purposes. That's what this video is about. Full disclosure here, I sell radiation detection devices, but almost all the things I'm going to be showing you here, I don't sell. A lot of it's old museum pieces. And so, but it's going to be full of information. It'll give you a starting point of which direction you want to go, depending what you're trying to prepare yourself for. It really depends on what you believe is going to happen, because none of us know what's going to happen. If you've learned anything about radiation from the movies, start over. It's wrong. Movies lied all the time. Somebody goes out there with a Geiger counter and making all kinds of noise and using something like this, and this is not a Geiger counter, but everybody thinks it is. They're going out there checking, and and eventually the ants grow as big as houses, and that's just the old B movies. The reality is something different. Everything you think you've learned about radiation from the mainstream media and from movies is a lie. Forget about it. Start over. This is a good starting point, because I'm going to try to give you the truth about this stuff. So forget about the movies. Okay, we're going to be talking about 3 different types of events you might want to prepare for. One would be a nuclear bomb of some sort, a detonation. Another one might be a dirty bomb, a conventional explosive with radioactive waste attached to it, or a nuclear power plant accident. That's the 3 things usually most people will try to prepare for if you're trying to prepare for a nuclear incident. We're going to be talking about all 3 of those. We're also going to be talking about 3 different basic categories of devices: radiological survey meters for high level, Geiger counters for low level, and mass spectrometers for super low levels. So there's going to be all that's going to be covered here. It's going to take a while, so you have to bear with it, but otherwise you might just want to leave because this might be a little bit too much for you. Maybe you don't care. Because so many people saw the bombs getting bigger and bigger in the 50s and 60s, and everybody's just started throwing up their hands saying, oh, why bother? I can't survive this anyway. It's too big. We're all doomed. We're all going to die. No, it's not true at all. As an example, World War III has already happened. Yeah, we nuked ourselves, the British, the French, the Chinese. There were nuclear warheads being detonated above ground for decades. And how come we're not all dead? No nuclear winter? Nobody's died? Why? Other than the 2 bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Because radiation just doesn't travel that far. They did have to evacuate one town where the winds shifted. Doesn't last very long, and it's not as intense as everybody's led to believe. All the fear porn movies, forget about it. The reality of radiation is a lot different. Nuclear war is different than what you've been taught in all the movies out there. There was an anti-nuke agenda, and it's still going on. You just have to start learning about radiation. I'm going to try to dispel some fears here. Okay, where do we start? We're going to start with radiological survey meters. What you call a Geiger counter, for those of you who don't know, this is not a Geiger counter. It's called a radiological survey meter. There's a big difference, and we're going to be going over all that. This video is going to take a while. Radiological survey meters are for high-level gamma and X-ray radiation. Mostly gamma is what we worry about. In the old civil defense program, we're mostly worried about gamma radiation. And no, this is not a symbol of the Illuminati. YouTube, fear porn. So this is measuring high-level gamma radiation. There's nothing I can legally own to make these needles move. This is life and death stuff. This is what we had in all the fallout shelters. This is what government buildings had. Schools had them. Fallout shelters had them. This is what all the police and fire departments had. They had radiological survey meters, not Geiger counters. Not unless they had more money in the budget and they could afford it. These are for high-level deadly radiation. Here's why. Look at the scale. We are measuring in Roentgens per hour. That R means Roentgens. R/hour. Roentgens per hour. That's what that means. Anytime you see a device listed in Roentgens, you're talking about life and death levels of radiation. Dangerous, deadly levels of radiation. Gamma being the most deadly. Now this device does also do, and most of them don't do this, most of them, this shield opening will allow me to measure high-level beta radiation, but this is an unusual model, and I'll show you inside. The gamma rays go right through the metal plate, but if you want to measure beta, you have to open up the shield. But then you're measuring beta, gamma, and X-ray. Inside here is what they call an ionization chamber. This device here is what measures the radiation. It's called an ionization chamber, and that's for penetrating ionizing radiation. That's what detects it, but you don't take it apart in order to measure anything because it goes right through the metal. So that's a radiological survey meter. Now, to go along with that, let me show you a couple more examples. Radiological survey meter, for measuring high-level gamma radiation. This device is also, it's going to measure, this one will only measure gamma radiation. You'll see there the scale also, Roentgens per hour. Roentgens per hour. You might have, I'm going to show you a lot of different devices which you can't even get, frankly. I mean, you really have to hunt down to find this kind of thing. This is an old military one, but also measures in Roentgens per hour. Device I want to show you here, well, actually the other one, this is a device, and for all these of you who are collectors, you can start salivating over some of this stuff because this is not stuff you're ever going to find. But this also measures in Roentgens per hour. This is a base unit for measuring in a fallout shelter with a separate detector on a cable going outside. But use this as an example here to do what we're talking about here. Again, Roentgens per hour. Now this is measuring something. Now, as I said, and this one you can salivate over this one too. This is only measuring high-level gamma radiation. I've got it on, but I can do this. I can dummy in a number here. Okay, I'm moving that needle without anything that's radioactive because I can't own anything legally to make this needle move. So essentially this is a false number. I know what I'm doing with these things. All right. So if I'm measuring, let's say I'm measuring one. I'm gonna dial it, and I'm trying to do this backwards here. Let's say I'm measuring 1 Roentgens per hour. 1 Roentgen per hour. All right. 1 Roentgen per hour. That means if I stayed out there for 1 hour, I would have been exposed to a dose of 1 Roentgen. That's not deadly, but anything when this needle moves on these devices, on the survey meters, that's something you don't want to mess around with. So anytime the needle's moving on these, you really want to get out of there. And you'd get underground, basically. That's why they had these in shelters. So 1 Roentgen per hour. Now I'm going to morph into the subcategory of survey meters, which are pocket dosimeters. Now, they don't ever show these on the movies. That's why most of you have no idea what they are. It really drives people crazy. They come to my table, and they call these Geiger counters. And they call these, they don't even know what these are. They think they're pens, so they don't know what the hell they are. That's the movies. That's the movies for it. They're lying to you. These are the most important things. This is what all the shelters had, all those police departments, fire departments, they all had these at a bare minimum. They didn't have Geiger counters. Okay, what is a dosimeter? Dosimeter. Dosimeter. These measure high-level gamma radiation. There's a needle in there. When you look at it through the light, you'll see, because you look at it, the light basically just shows you the scale. It doesn't matter what you point it at, just need a light source. And this one happens to measure 500 Roentgens. That's very high. This one measures 200 milliroentgens. I'll go over the numbers here in a second. But anyway, you look in there in a scale with a needle. This tells you the accumulated dose of gamma radiation. The dose you've received. So if you were outside and this happened to read, I could use the other one, but let's just use this one. If that happened to read 1 Roentgen per hour and you're out there for 1 hour and you were wearing this, this would read 1 hour. I'm sorry, it would read 1 Roentgen after 1 hour. This goes in your pocket. Gamma radiation travels through walls, right through your body. And when you're exposed, this gets exposed, tells you how much you've been exposed to over time. If you were out there 10 hours, this would read 10 Roentgens. Very simple math. What do the numbers mean now? Basically, 0 to 50 Roentgens. This one goes to 200 Roentgens. This is a very common model you're going to find. They made 1.6 million of these. There's the model number, if I can get it right. They made 1.6 million of these. It goes to 200 Roentgens. Not Roentgens per hour. Get this straight. Roentgens per hour. This is like the speedometer in your car. Roentgens. This is like the odometer in your car. Miles per hour. Miles. If you want to think of it that way. Roentgens per hour. Roentgens. Got it? This measures your accumulated dose. 0 to 50, no visible effects. Now we're talking about numbers for civil defense here. If you receive 50 Roentgens, that's a lot of radiation. That would be enough to pull you off your job for your lifetime if you're working in a radiation environment. So that's a lot. And that's not to say there's no visible effects, but that's not to say 10 years down the road you come out with cancer. That's a lot of radiation. But for survival purposes, you're going to live at 50 Roentgens. Anywhere between 50 and 200, which just goes to 200, 50 to 200, you will get radiation poisoning. You will have radiation sickness. But if you stop at 200, you will not die. Remember, this needle goes up but doesn't come back down. Tells your accumulated dose. So if you stop at 200, you will not die. This one here measures in, I think I can show you here if I can find the right spot. This measures in 200, not Roentgens, but 200 milliroentgens, MR, 200 milliroentgens. That means it's 1,000 times more sensitive than this one. This would be used mainly, this type of use, this is about a $280 unit, by the way, brand new. You wear this in your pocket if you work, as I say, you work in a nuclear power plant, work as an X-ray technician, or some other occupation like a welder that might have to have these due to OSHA requirements. They would wear these in their pocket, and over the end of the shift, they would return it at the end of the shift. They'd read it. If it read anything, they'd enter it on their medical records, and if it read anything, frankly, you probably have to do an investigation because it really shouldn't read anything on this. 200 milliroentgens is nothing. You wouldn't, no effects whatsoever. But if you're exposed to that much day after day after day, that adds up, and you have problems. So that's why people that work in a higher radiation environment may have to wear these, or film badges. You've seen the film badges. Those can't be read by the wearer. They have to be turned in to a lab. Every quarter they send into a lab. They show your accumulated dose over a whole quarter. This will be done on a daily basis. Depending on the level of radiation potential exposure, you may have to wear, because just be a film badge for lower risk people, or for higher risk people, they may have to wear a dosimeter. And it might be an electronic type dosimeter too. There's other types of dosimeters, the electronic dosimeter that would have a readout instead of a visual needle in a scale. But these are kind of archaic today, but they're still very functional, and they don't take any maintenance as much as the electronic ones, and they would survive an EMP where the electronic ones wouldn't. So the dosimeters, like I say, it's a one-way deal. The needle moves up, but it doesn't move back down, so it tells an accumulated dose. Now that would sound to most people like a one-time use. No, it's not a one-time use, because you have something called a dosimeter charger, which allows you to reset the dosimeter by putting it on here and looking through it, and it lights up because there's a battery in this, but there's not a battery in the dosimeter. The battery in this lights up, you look through it, and you can dial with this dial, you can move it up or down, the needle up and down, you can put it to 0, reset it. You can move the needle wherever you want. That's an example of a dosimeter charger. That's from the civil defense era. This is a Canadian one, but also it's a dosimeter charger. This is a German one for these German dosimeters. But frankly, you can use any of these dosimeters with any of these devices. Generally, they all work. But this is a German one. It goes on top here, and you could read it. And anyway, batteries inside. Or you might even have a dosimeter charger. There's a lot of funky looking ones. This one is actually a dosimeter charger. This is kind of rare from the mid-'80s, because it's the only time you can see civil defense and FEMA together. That's the only device I have where actually you can see both of them. It goes in here like this. You look through it. It's got a piezoelectric generator, so there's no battery in this one. But this is another way to reset a dosimeter. They're all functional ways of resetting a dosimeter. By resetting them, you got to bring the needle back to 0 so they can be used at all. Because even though this might be a 0 when you buy it, a year from now, 10 years from now, it might not be a 0 anymore. It might have drifted completely off scale. Then you have nothing. You have to be able to put that needle at least to somewhere where you can see it, whether it be on 0, not as immaterial, but somewhere you can see it to see how much level you can accumulate. And then you can do a calculation based if you couldn't get down to 0. So you really need both of these. If you're going to buy a dosimeter, you need a charger as well. To really make it functional, you have to have a charger. They aren't that expensive. I sell these for like $40 for a set, for a charger and a dosimeter. But these are very important. These are what all the emergency services had. All of them. Police departments, fire departments, fallout shelters, government buildings, schools. They all had these at a bare minimum. That's what they would have for emergency preparedness for a nuclear war. That's what they have. Now, these devices do not detect fallout, beta radiation. Fallout refers to the dust that come down. These are for high-level gamma, but that's the most dangerous of the radiations, the ones that are going to kill you. Beta radiation, yeah, it could kill you, but frankly, beta radiation is reduced. Within 7 hours, 90% of its lethality is gone. Within 7 hours of the beta radiation falling you, the dusts. Now, if it continues and continues and continues, then you have to add more. And within 2 days, 99% of its lethality will be gone with beta radiation. Gamma is a whole different sort, a whole different thing. I have other videos about differences between alpha, beta, gamma, X-ray, the different rays. So get that. You need a primer to understand some of that stuff. So radiological survey meters for high-level, deadly radiation, gamma, that you would get in a nuclear detonation. It might persist for a week or two at the most where you would need these. And frankly, you probably need to be within about 50 miles of the problem to measure anything with these. As far as a major nuclear detonation, you need to be probably within about 50 miles. Because if there's a mountain between you and the source, you'll read nothing with this. If you're off on the horizon, the curvature of the Earth, unless you believe in a flat Earth, go figure, then you'll have nothing because the gamma rays might just be going over your head and won't come around the curvature of the Earth. So if you're far enough away, you basically will be getting nothing with these devices. Okay, I think now that covers the basic high-level category. For high-level category, we're talking about a nuclear power plant meltdown if you're very close. Like Chernobyl, lost containment. That was an issue where you would need one of these if you're close enough for high-level gamma radiation. Fukushima, no, unless you're going in the containment building, because Fukushima has not lost containment. So you can walk around the plant all day with this and you're not going to get anything. But if you try to go in the containment building, wow, now you got a problem. So you're not going to, for nuclear power plant meltdown, for traditional, typical nuclear power plants, this probably wouldn't be suitable unless you're very close and it's lost containment. Okay, because a lot of people say, well, this is useless, and if you read numbers on this, you're already dead. And I just explained to you, no, you're not dead. I told you what the numbers mean. This dosimeter here, for instance, let's see, this one goes to 500 Roentgens. If you receive 500 Roentgens, you probably would be dead within 2 weeks. Anything at 450 Roentgens is about the 50-50 point, where 50% would die, 50% might recover. At 500 or 600 Roentgens, death is expected. 100% deaths are expected within 2 weeks. This one measures, this is a different one. There's all kinds of scales. This one's measuring 50 Roentgens. You could top this one out and not have visible effects, but that's a lot of radiation. 50 Roentgens will pull you off the job for life if you were in the radiation industry of some sort. So, high level for basically nuclear war. That's what the survey meters are for. Let's move on now. That's for dosimeters and radiological survey meters. The main thing that the civil defense had for their program, because that's the most deadly. Now let's move on to Geiger counters, the thing everybody thinks they want. Maybe you'll think you want it, maybe not after I tell you about Geiger counters. Geiger counters, this is an example of one. Again, you're not going to find this equipment. This is rare stuff, but this is typically what a Geiger counter looks like, the civil defense version. This actually measures low level, beta, gamma, and X-ray. This is a Geiger counter. You can easily see most Geiger counters by this tube, this Geiger-Muller tube. That's why it's called a Geiger counter. It's a different type of detector than the ionization chamber. This will actually detect low levels of beta, gamma, and X-ray. This device starts out at, remember the other ones, it says Roentgens? Well, this one starts out at, if I get the cable out of the way, which way do I got to go to get the cable out of the way? Okay, here we go. Milliroentgens, see the MR per hour? Milliroentgens per hour. And you'll see it starts out at 0.1 milliroentgens per hour. That's 10,000 times lower than the survey meters. Remember, survey meters, Roentgens per hour, starts out at 1 Roentgen per hour. The Geiger counter, this particular Geiger counter, starts out at 0.1 milliroentgens. Now, milli means 1,000, so already you're 1,000 times there. When you add that 0.1 in there, now you're talking about 10,000 times more sensitive than a radiological survey meter. Listen carefully. There's nothing I'm going to measure with a Geiger counter that's going to kill me in the short term. Yes, I said that. I can see the trolls right now running down there and putting all caps lock on their comments and telling them I'm full of crap. You can't, there's nothing you're going to measure with a Geiger counter that's going to kill you, at least in the short term. Now, if I'm exposed a long time to it, yeah, this accumulated and it could be bad. But frankly, all these nuclear events, they don't last very long. Depending on where you are and what the situation is, they aren't going to last long enough to be killed by something you're going to measure with a Geiger counter. Why do I say that? If you overload this Geiger-Muller tube, it saturates the tube. This reads 0. Remember, this is 10,000 times more sensitive than survey meters. Overload this Geiger-Muller tube, saturated. This doesn't peg out. It doesn't do anything. It's at 0. You go outside and you say, well, there's nothing wrong here. We don't have any radiation. You could have a lot of radiation. You wouldn't know it with a Geiger counter. Fun and games, life and death. Fun and games, life and death. If you want to look for rocks, you need a Geiger counter. If you want to find something around your house that's radioactive, you need a Geiger counter. These are all things that aren't going to kill you. If you get too much radiation, this thing won't even work. If it's an electronic one, like these, they will just overload. And that's assuming it wasn't an atomic blast, because if it's an atomic blast, the EMP would kill these things anyway. Short them out, yeah, the EMP. Whereas these old ones would survive the EMP. So you don't want to use a Geiger counter for a real emergency, a true emergency. Now, there are some instances where you could use a Geiger counter. Let's show you something here also. This is a Geiger counter, see a cord. Usually they have a cord and a probe, right? It's the probe, cord, this is the main unit. This one's measuring 17 microrentkins. Now it's 16. It constantly varies. All right, let's back it up a little bit. It's measuring in milliroentgens. I called it 15 microrentkins because that's what it is, because you see the decimal place, 0.015 milliroentgens. But if you move that decimal place over 3 points, you're going to get microrentkins, 1,000 times different. If you move the decimal place 3 times the other direction, with a whole lot of zeros in front of it, you're going to get roentgens. This is measuring in milliroentgens, and most Geiger counters will measure in milliroentgens. An example of the probe, this particular probe here, you'll see that it has a top. On the top here, it has a little metal part. I'm going to flip this open. And now you see that this is actually the mica window. Now I'm measuring beta, and I'm measuring gamma and X-ray. If I close this, snap it in place, the beta does not go through there, so now I'm measuring gamma and X-ray. Beta isn't very penetrating. Alpha even less so, but see my other videos about that. So this is a typical type of Geiger probe, Geiger-Muller probe. This one has the same sort of idea where these slots here, I can rotate it, I can show you the tube is inside. That allows me to disintegrate between beta and gamma radiation. Now there's modern devices, which I showed you briefly. And if you've watched some of my videos, I've used these exact 2 units for doing all the testing on beaches and on the West Coast, because everybody thought they were going to die from Fukushima, but no, that's not the case, obviously. Here we have, presently we're showing 10 microrentkins, 9 microrentkins. I can set this to milliroentgens if I want. I can set it to roentgens. I can set it to counts per minute. I can set it to sieverts. There's a lot of different ways of measuring radiation. This is a typical consumer one, a more high-end consumer one. This is a little more low-end consumer one. This one's right now measuring 13 counts per minute, a different unit of measure, but I can switch it to sieverts or milliroentgens, microrentkins, what have you. You can set these apart. Now, these have Geiger-Muller tubes in it, but there's no probe, as you see. There's no separate cord. This has a Geiger-Muller tube built into the unit right back here. And this one has a pancake probe, they call it, which measures alpha, beta, gamma, and X-ray. Now, most Geiger counters only measure beta, gamma, and X-ray. But this one actually has the mica window. It's a bigger probe. I'll get different numbers with these. And any Geiger counter, you might get different numbers, frankly. Right now, this is measuring 12 microrentkins, but that other unit you saw that I was using was measuring about 15. Different surface area, different types of detectors will have different numbers. They'll vary. This one's a smaller detector, and right now it's set to counts per minute, but this allows you to detect lower levels of beta, gamma, and X-ray. Again, mainly what we're worried about is, in this case, for Geiger counters, is beta and gamma. See my other videos about types of radiation. Okay, so Geiger counters for very low level stuff. Now, well, not very low level, just low level stuff. There's a big difference, remember, between survey meter and Geiger counter, 10,000 times more sensitive. There's nothing I'm going to measure with a Geiger counter that's going to hurt me. Yeah, I said it again. Boy, get mad at me. But basically, unless I'm exposed a long time, I mean, think about it, folks. 16 microrentkins. Start doing the math. Find out how long I'd have to be exposed. Even if I was reading 100 microrentkins. Do the math. Find out how long I'm being exposed and how long until I get any kind of radiation levels that are going to hurt me. Just do the math. For giggles and whatever, do the math. Find out what I'm talking about. And you're going to find out that your fears are unfounded if you're trying to measure something with a Geiger counter you think is dangerous. Take whatever reading you want. Find out if it's dangerous. As an example, you've seen me use these before. I have all kinds of radiation test sources. Fiestaware, the original way to nuke your food. This is pretty radioactive. I'm not afraid of it. I'll eat off it today. It's not a big deal. This is radioactive. This will almost top out a Geiger counter. Yeah, I'll show you. Geiger counter, and it's reading 17 in the moment. It started getting close to the radiation source. And I can probably make this so that you can actually hear it. Okay. See? It's not dangerous, but it'll just about top out a Geiger counter. Now, let me push the button here to get the screen activated. It went into sleep mode. See there? It's actually going a lot. Now, these electronic ones take a long time to react. And you may not be able to hear it, but you can see it's going up a lot. And if I take the radiation test source away, it'll take a long time for it to come back down too. So that's a little bit of disadvantage of these modern ones. You see this one said it counts per minute. See, nothing's happening yet, but you can hear it. And it's starting to alarm already because at 100, this one set the alarm point at 100. But you can hear it, and it'll go up, and it'll go up, and it'll go up, but it'll take a while. And when I take it away, you'll see that it doesn't come right back down. It takes a while for it to come back down. So this one will take about a minute to come back down normal. And this one's going to keep alarming in the meantime. This will almost top out a Geiger counter. It won't do a thing to this survey meter, but it'll top out a Geiger counter. This is not dangerous. Now, I don't sleep with this under my pillow. I wouldn't be too worried about that even if I did, but the point here is something that will top out a Geiger counter isn't necessarily unsafe. We use this all the time. Did your grandparents die of cancer because they use these? No, probably not. This hasn't been around a long time. This is only research a little bit. We don't need to get into it. But there's all kinds of radioactive things around us all the time. And if you're measuring with a Geiger counter, it's not going to kill you, at least in the short term. If you're exposed a long time, that's a different story. So that's why I don't believe Geiger counters are really that necessary for most anything. However, there are some uses for Geiger counters. Let's get some ideas here. We're talking about low levels of radiation. If it's a dirty bomb is basically a conventional explosive with radioactive waste around it that gets distributed in an area of whatever, several blocks, whatever, wherever that conventional explosive sends all the particles. So you've contaminated an area several blocks wide, maybe a mile at the most, and you're only going to be able to detect, it'll be such levels, low levels of radiation, you're probably going to need a Geiger counter. In the case of a dirty bomb, there won't be an EMP associated, so these modern ones would work, or the older ones. You wouldn't be able to get any kind of reading off a survey meter. More than likely, you're going to need something called a Geiger counter. That's for lower levels of radiation, and you pretty much have to be right there. If you're a mile away from it, you're not going to read anything from a Geiger counter. A dirty bomb is really going to be a scare tactic if they ever decide to use one. It's really not that dangerous unless you're right there. Dirty bomb is not that much of a concern. And for that, you would need a Geiger counter. Nuclear power plant. Now, again, I said, first of all, the EMP will destroy modern ones if it's a nuclear detonation from a nuclear bomb of some sort. But these older ones would survive. They're the older circuitry versus computers. Computers would be fried in EMP. These older ones probably would not be. Okay? So if you're worried about a nuclear bomb, if you're say 30 miles away or so, this might be starting to be affected because you're getting far enough away from the source that you can start measuring it. But in a true nuclear incident, a nuclear bomb of some sort, a survey meter is the life and death stuff. When you're far enough away, eventually this will be useful, or if the levels go down far enough, then this eventually will be useful in an area where you've had a nuclear detonation of some sort. So Geiger counters, low level, dirty bombs, nuclear power plants, I didn't cover that yet, but nuclear bombs if you're far enough away. Now, as far as nuclear power plants, basically, you don't have an EMP associated with a nuclear power plant. So these devices would suffice because there won't be an EMP that will have destroyed, unless an EMP destroyed the plant and so on. But basically, these devices will work in a nuclear power plant accident. If you're within about, say, 30 to 50 miles. Because anything beyond that, you're probably not going to measure anything. Yeah, the exclusion zones. Why aren't we all dead again from that nuclear winter we had because of all those nuclear devices detonated, which there was none, because you're far enough away. There's another category here, a subcategory of Geiger counters we're going to talk about, and that's devices like these. Now, I did whole videos on these, a whole video where I describe in detail both of these devices. Basically, they're just alarms. They aren't really Geiger counters. These are modern devices, so they probably wouldn't survive an EMP associated with a nuclear bomb. But for a nuclear power plant, when there's no EMP, they probably will survive. Now, both of these claim to be EMP hardened to a certain mil spec, so maybe they will survive. I try not to let people on because they may not. If any of these modern devices, you're going to want to put them in a Faraday cage. If you think they're going to be useful for you after you have the EMP and you have the power to power these things, so either batteries or whatever, then you want to be able to put them in a Faraday cage so they will function later. Then you can protect these new modern electronic devices if you keep them in a Faraday cage. But if you keep these in a Faraday cage, they won't become an alarm anymore. Because frankly, I wear this when I do my shows. I wear it like so. And when people walk by me, sometimes this alarms. Yeah, people walking by, sometimes this alarms. If they've just had, it happens about 2 or 3 times a year. If they just had a CAT scan or a PET scan where they have the radioactive dye in them, yeah, they're living with radiation powerful enough to set this alarming. It's kind of strange sounding, but they're living at levels higher than this in their body all the time, or at least for the first 48 hours or so. Or the radioactive seed that gets planted in the prostate, for instance, it won't set it off them walking by, but I can definitely pick it up with a Geiger counter, and they're living with it all the time in their bodies. These devices will start alarming. It's a no-brainer. They just start making noise. This one at 10 milliroentgens, this one at 100 milliroentgens. They just start making noise. Then you can determine whether or not you need to do anything. All the nuclear power plant accidents we've ever had in this entire world, they've tried to get things under control before they eventually have to alert authorities. You would know about it before the authorities if you had one of these devices, because they would just start alarming. It's a no-brainer. Reset it, see if it's a false alarm. You could leave the area long before anybody even knew anything was going on, including the police. Potentially, right? And there wouldn't be any EMP associated with the nuclear power plant incident, more than likely, so that you would be able to use these devices or modern Geiger counter. The Geiger counter can be the same thing. You saw how this one's, you can set both these to alarm. And if you have them on all the time, they'll run the batteries down. But if you had it on all the time, you could actually use these to, the alarm to do the same thing if you had them on all the time. Okay? But a Geiger counter, trying to use it to alert you, no. You have to have batteries in it, you have to have it on, and you have to be looking at the needle. Unless you had a speaker or something hooked up loud enough you could hear, it's not an alarm system, really. It couldn't be used as that. But Geiger counters could be, and these certainly are an alarm device. So if you're looking for something for a nuclear power plant, you're looking at, in my opinion, your best bet is these types of devices, these alarms, or a Geiger counter, but not necessarily a survey meter unless it's blew its top and lost containment. Basically, you're going to want to go with a Geiger counter for those types of incidences. Okay, now there's, what else? Okay, low levels. This is something, that's another misconception everybody has because of the internet, whatever. You can't measure, if you're looking for contaminated food in tuna because you believe Fukushima is poisoning the world's oceans, whatever, or something else happened, you're looking for contamination in your food. You can't do it with a Geiger counter. End of story. Quit whining about it. I saw so many people running around buying Geiger counters, think they were going to find radiation in kelp or tuna or whatever, and I just had to keep laughing. It was amazing. I actually pulled all Geiger counters for sale off my table for a couple of years after the Fukushima incident because people were buying things blindly, had no idea what they were doing. Uneducated and fearful. All right, let me go over this here briefly. As an example, we know that there is radiation, at least some of us know, there's radiation in bananas in the form of iodine, or I'm not iodine, potassium. Iodine would be kelp. Radium would be Brazil nuts. There's natural radiation. In fact, there's natural radiation in everything, but bananas have potassium in them. Now, I can put this up to this all day long and all night long, forever till the end of time, and it's not going to measure anything. Why not? Because the levels are lower than background radiation. Now, again, this is on. See? It's on. It's not measuring anything. But if I put the Fiesta ware up to it, it starts going nuts. So, all right. So this is working. It's not. You're not going to detect anything. But besides what you learned on the internet, you're not going to use a Geiger counter to check for radiation in food. End of story. Here's an example. The meme everybody likes to produce. Bluefin tuna in 2013, found off the coast of California, found to have radioactive cesium in the tuna, which they said could only be attributed to the nuclear power plant disaster in Japan, Fukushima Daiichi. That was the assertion, besides the fact it could have been from other sources. Okay, let's leave that aside for a minute. Okay, let's say it was contaminated with Fukushima radiation. The levels of radiation found in that bluefin tuna were 30 times magnitude lower than normal background radiation of the fish to begin with. You can't check anything lower than background radiation with a Geiger counter. So that so-called contaminated tuna, which was, by the way, the equivalent radiation of eating about 1/20th of a banana. Yeah. 1 cup of tuna versus 1/20th of banana. That was the big scare. 30 times magnitude lower than background radiation. So you're not going if you're buying a Geiger counter to find radiation in food, tuna, kelp, or whatever, apples, whatever food, you're not going to find anything. You wasted your money. But at least it assuaged your fears because you were so fearful, but because of the fear porn you saw on YouTube, that there's radiation and everything, and you're going to die because of Fukushima. The, the anti-nuke people just having a ball with this. Well, you can't use a Geiger counter for that. What you do need, and this is the third category, is a mass spectrometer. Now, I don't have a probe for a mass spectrometer really to show you. There's not much to see anyway. Basically, it's a lot larger. It hooks up to a computer. There's a unit that hooks between, but there's not much to see. It produces a graph on your computer screen. It shows exactly every single isotope, radioactive isotope, that could be in that tuna or banana, whatever. So if you want to measure the potassium in banana, you need a mass spectrometer. That's what you need. You either put it in a chamber, you put the probe up to it. There's different ways. It's a very complicated device. It's very hard to learn. And it gives numbers that won't mean anything to the layman, measuring in bariquels or whatever. There's different ways you can convert them, but it's measuring it in different types of units. And it's not easy to use. They start at thousands of dollars and go on up to over $100,000, depending on the unit. They are literally very expensive. They're complicated. They're intense. They're scientific instruments. They're not suitable whatsoever for survival type situations. So basically, I'm discarding all the use of the mass spectrometer for any kind of survival situation. Yes, you can use them for higher level things. Remember, this you can see this measures something on the Geiger counter. And it's going to show you exactly what's in there. In this case, a type of uranium oxide. And you'll be able to measure exactly the type of uranium in there. Or there's cesium or iodine, whatever. Banana would be potassium. You'll find out exactly what's in this banana. But you know what? You start playing around with it, and you're going to find there's an example. I'll just grab something. There's radiation in this napkin. There's radiation in this wall. Radiation in this table. Radiation in this clothing. And you'll be able to identify exactly which isotopes are in that clothing or whatever. But if you're doing it because of some fear porn on YouTube, you're going to make yourself go even more crazy. Because you're going to find everything is radioactive. Your body's radioactive. Everything's radioactive to a certain level. It's not a level, most things aren't a level that you can pick them up with a Geiger counter. But everything is radioactive, including your body. So I would suggest to you, if you're fearful because of all the fear porn on YouTube about Fukushima and you think your food is contaminated, buy a Geiger counter. In fact, buy a cheap one. This one's only 115 bucks, I think I sell these ones. It's cheap. And put it up to your food every single time you eat. You'll find nothing. Whether it's tuna or kelp or bananas or Brazil nuts, you will find nothing. But hey, satisfy your fears. You feel, oh, well, it's not radioactive. These guys on YouTube lied to me. Well, yes, they did lie to you. You won't find anything radioactive in your food with a Geiger counter. So buy one. Check everything. Then you'll finally find out that they lied to you. Yeah, bananas aren't going to make this go off. I can have it up there all day. It's not going to make it go off. But something that really is radioactive will make it go off. All right? So buy a Geiger counter. If you're still so fearful of radiation, buy a cheap Geiger counter. You'll be less and less fearful because you won't find anything in any of your food. End of story, right? But if you're still so fearful, you say, damn it, I'm anti-nuke and I'm bound to find something in my food, then buy a mass spectrometer. Then you can find things in your food. But it's going to be so low, it's not going to be dangerous, and it's going to be so minute, and you're going to start finding in everything, and you just made yourself even more paranoid, and you might as well put a gun to your head right now because there's radiation in everything, including all the food you eat. Yeah, I can find radiation in an apple, even though it doesn't have potassium in it. I'll be able to find something in this apple if I put it in a mass spectrometer or a gamma spectrometer. Okay, so if you want to be super paranoid, then get a mass spectrometer, but have a gun ready because you're going to need it. because it's going to make you worse. You need to see a doctor, not buy a mass spectrometer. That's why if you really still fear, if you're basically just generally fearful because you don't understand, which most of you don't, buy a Geiger counter, check all your food. There's not going to be anything radioactive. Then you can start going about your business because then you will be less fearful. So buy a Geiger counter if you're very paranoid about it. You won't find anything. You won't find anything around your house either. More than likely. More than likely you don't have this at your house. More than likely even your smoke detector, Americium 241. Yeah, it's radioactive, but you put a Geiger counter, but it doesn't do anything. Unless you break open the ion chamber, then you get something. So it's just you do that. But most of you, that's all you have is radioactive in your house. That's going to be measured by a Geiger counter. Unless you have some antique watches or clocks that have radium in it. There's other things you can get, of course. Thorium. I have all kinds of samples at my table. But you're not going to find anything with a Geiger counter in your house. More than likely, you don't have anything. Unless you got some antiques around. So if you're fearful of it, buy a Geiger counter. Then they'll probably make you less fearful of it. If you're still so fearful, you buy a mass spectrometer. Put a bullet in your head. And see a doctor before you do that because you're gonna find radiation everywhere. But it won't be dangerous. That's the point. Again, we're talking about survival situations here. So let's see. Did I cover everything? Boy, I've been having to do this many times, trying to get everything in here. I've had to slow down, and even then, I'm still talking fast. There's so much to cover. This is only a starting point, but let's give a summary here. Radiological survey meters for high-level deadly gamma radiation from a nuclear detonation, or a nuclear power plant if it's blowing its top like Chernobyl did. High-level gamma radiation. And what goes along with those you can use for dosage. You can get dosimeters with the proper chargers in order to determine levels of radiation that you've been exposed to. This is Roentgens per hour. This is Roentgens. Speedometer, odometer, right? That's the summary of radiological survey for true emergencies, radiological survey meters. Geiger counters, next category. Dirty bombs, some nuclear power plant accidents, only nuclear events like a nuclear detonation. If you're far away, these will be useful for. Not useful for food, very low level stuff, easily overloaded. So in a high level event, this is useless. But you can play around with it, and you can check things around the house and go buy antiques at the antique store, whatever. In that case, you want a Geiger counter. Dirty bomb, nuclear power plant accident, if you're close enough, and playing around with. Mass spectrometer. Mass spectrometer, if you want to find individual isotopes in your foods or in whatever, then you need a mass spectrometer. This is stuff that's lower than background radiation. Not for survival purposes, in my opinion. And nuclear power plants, this is probably your best option. This type of device. Doesn't have to be these, there's other devices. This type of device. Or a Geiger counter set to automatically alarm if you're that concerned about it. So that's a summary. Now let me talk briefly about calibration. Because so many people see various programs on TV or so many YouTube videos say, oh, you got to have them calibrated, otherwise they're no good. Wrong. Measures in Roentgens per hour. If this needle is moving at all, and the fact that I can't legally own anything to make this needle move, if it's moving at all, I'm going to get the hell out of there. I don't care how accurate it is. The needle's moving. That's bad. I'm getting the hell out of there. For civilian purposes, there's no need to have these. If you want to calibrate them, that's fine. With the government owned them, calibrate them every 4 years. These generally cost about $60, $80. Calibrate it every 4 years, costs you about $90 each time you calibrate it. But go ahead, have a ball. Calibrate them if you want. Geiger counters. Now this one here would be a different story. But basically, you can see they have calibrated every so often. This was a government issue. This is not a toy here. This is a professional government issue model. This would be one that you would use to alert the public, basically. But for civilian use, with the knowledge that nothing you can own there's nothing you're going to measure that's going to kill you with this, at least in the long term, and something like this tops it out. Why do you need it calibrated? Unless you work in a lab situation, in which case this is 60 years old. You wouldn't want this in a lab situation anyway. But if you want to get more accurate readings, and you need to for government for posting results on some page or something, well, there won't be any pages, but if you were trying to alert your whole block and you need to know exact numbers, then okay, have it calibrated. But other than that, or unless you're a lab situation, there's really no need to calibrate them because there's nothing you're going to own. There's nothing that's going to be setting this off that's going to kill you. It's not dangerous levels unless you're exposed a long time. And then just do the math. You can find out how long it takes based on the numbers you're getting. But again, there's nothing that's going to hurt you with the Geiger counter in the short term, unless you're going to eat it. But Geiger counter, summary, nuclear power plant accidents, if you're close enough. That's what you need for nuclear power plants or these devices. Okay? And then mass spectrometer, if you're trying to find out individual isotopes because you're damn well sure you're going to find something from Fukushima or wherever, then you need a mass spectrometer. And good luck with that. So I guess I covered most everything. Boy, I hope I don't have to do this again because I've been trying to get this all in. And yes, we're 45 minutes already. This took a long time. But I could have gone on a lot longer. But I have other videos separating different types of topics so that you don't have to sit through all of them. But if you're looking for a device, and I'll go ahead and put my own plug in here, even though I've never done this before. Theprepperstop.com. I do sell some of these devices. Theprepperstop.com. That's the first time I've ever given that website out on any of my videos because I'm doing this more for education. But anyway, thanks to everybody for watching and listening. So long.